On February 28, 2026, the world awoke to seismic news that would reverberate far beyond the borders of Iran. The headlines flashed across every screen, radios crackled with urgent bulletins, and social media erupted in a frenzy of speculation and disbelief. The death of a leader who had shaped the destiny of a nation for decades was not just a local event, it was a global turning point. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader for over 3 decades, was dead. His rule had spanned generations, weathering revolutions, wars, and international crises. For millions, he was the face of the Islamic Republic, unyielding, enigmatic, and fiercely protective of Iran's sovereignty. His passing marked the end of an era defined by fierce anti-Western ideology and relentless confrontation. Under his leadership, Iran had become a symbol of resistance to Western influence, rallying supporters at home and abroad while drawing the ire of adversaries. Streets, once filled with chants of defiance, now echoed with uncertainty, as Iranians grappled with the loss of a figure who had dominated their political landscape for so long. The announcement from Tehran sent shockwaves through global capitals. In Washington, Moscow, Beijing, and Tel Aviv, intelligence agencies scrambled to assess the fallout. What would this mean for the nuclear deal, for regional alliances, for the fragile balance of power in the Middle East? The uncertainty was palpable as diplomats and analysts worked through the night, piecing together the implications of Khamenei's sudden absence. Khamenei's death left a power vacuum in a regime built on his iron will, with factions inside Iran immediately maneuvering for control. Reformists, hardliners, and the powerful Revolutionary Guard all saw an opening to shape the future. Behind closed doors, alliances were forged and broken in real time, as the struggle for succession began in earnest. For Washington and Jerusalem, this was a moment of both opportunity and danger, a chance to reshape the region, but also a risk of chaos. Policymakers weighed their options, aware that any misstep could ignite a wider conflict or destabilize fragile alliances. The stakes had never been higher, and every decision was fraught with consequence. The world held its breath, knowing the next moves would set the course for a new, unpredictable era. Markets trembled, citizens everywhere watched events unfold with a mix of hope and dread, and the sense of living through history was inescapable. Into this uncertainty, the United States prepared to act, ready to turn transition into a flashpoint. As military planners reviewed contingencies and diplomats drafted urgent cables, the world braced for what would come next, knowing that the death of one man could alter the fate of millions. Just hours after the shocking announcement of Supreme Leader Khamenei's death, a wave of uncertainty swept across Iran and the wider Middle East. The streets of Tehran filled with anxious crowds, their faces etched with fear and confusion as rumors swirled about what would come next. The world's attention was riveted on the region, with news outlets broadcasting non-stop updates and speculation about the future of Iran's leadership and the potential for chaos. In the midst of this turmoil, President Donald Trump addressed the world from the Oval Office in a rare, late-night televised speech. His tone was grave, his words carefully chosen as he spoke directly to both the American people and the international community. Trump announced the launch of Operation Epic Fury, a massive, coordinated military campaign against Iran. He described it as an unprecedented response to what he called the regime's decades-long campaign of terror and destabilization. The president vowed that the United States, together with its allies, would put an end to the Iranian regime's threat once and for all. Framing the operation as a direct answer to years of Iranian aggression, Trump cited a long list of provocations, missile attacks, proxy wars, and threats against American interests and allies. He insisted that the time for warnings and sanctions had passed, and that decisive action was now required. The president declared that the mission's goal was not just to retaliate, but to dismantle the very architecture of terror that had enabled Iran to project power across the region. He spoke of disrupting networks that supplied weapons and support to militant groups, and of crippling Iran's ability to threaten its neighbors. This was no limited strike or symbolic gesture. Trump made it clear that the era of so-called strategic patience was over. The United States, he said, would no longer tolerate provocations or half-measures. The world was witnessing a turning point in American foreign policy. The president's words left little doubt about his intentions. The ultimate aim was regime collapse, and the establishment of a new regional order. Trump called on the Iranian people to reject their leaders and promised support for those seeking freedom and reform. Operation Epic Fury, he revealed, was being launched in close coordination with Israel and key Western allies. The campaign would be swift, overwhelming, and relentless, designed to cripple Iran's military infrastructure and political leadership in a matter of days. The first wave of airstrikes targeted Iran's military and political core, command centers, missile sites, and government buildings. Explosions lit up the night sky over Tehran and other major cities, signaling the start of a new and dangerous chapter. Inside Iran, the internal power struggle that had erupted after Khamenei's death was instantly overshadowed by the reality of war. Politicians and military leaders scrambled to respond as chaos gripped the capital. Around the globe, governments and citizens alike braced for the consequences. As the first explosions echoed across Iran, the world watched in apprehension, knowing that the events unfolding would shape the future of the Middle East, and perhaps the world, for years to come. The White House wasted no time outlining Operation Epic Fury's objectives. The primary goal: force the collapse of Iran's regime and create space for a new, non-theocratic government. The plan called for overwhelming military pressure, crippling command structures, destroying nuclear facilities, and dismantling Iran's missile arsenal. The operation also aimed to sever Iran's support for proxies like Hezbollah and the Houthis, breaking the axis of resistance. By targeting the IRGC and Quds Force, the U.S. sought to end decades of Iranian-sponsored terrorism. This was not just containment, it was a bid to remake the region's balance of power. The world watched as this high-stakes gamble unfolded in real time. Operation Epic Fury erupted in the darkness before dawn, unleashing a relentless and meticulously coordinated barrage. U.S. and Israeli fighter jets roared through the night sky, their afterburners blazing as they launched precision-guided missiles at carefully selected targets deep inside Iran. From the sea, cruise missiles arced upward from American and Israeli warships, streaking toward their objectives with devastating accuracy. The opening salvo was designed to shock and overwhelm, striking with speed and ferocity that left little time for Iran to react. Explosions lit up the horizon, painting the night with fire and steel as the world watched in stunned silence. The first wave of attacks targeted the backbone of Iran's military power. Key IRGC command centers, sophisticated air defense batteries, and heavily fortified missile sites were struck almost simultaneously. Even Iran's most secretive nuclear facilities, long shrouded in secrecy and protected by layers of defenses, were not spared. The assault was not random. It was the result of months of intelligence gathering and planning, aiming to paralyze Iran's ability to coordinate a response and to cripple its strategic capabilities in a single, decisive blow. But the offensive was not limited to bombs and missiles. In the shadows, cyber warfare teams launched sophisticated attacks, crippling Iran's communications networks and sowing confusion among military commanders. At the same time, naval bases along the Persian Gulf erupted in flames as missiles found their marks, neutralizing Iran's maritime threats and further isolating the country from the outside world. The scale of destruction was unprecedented. Across Iran, smoke rose from dozens of sites, military installations, command bunkers, missile silos, and infrastructure vital to Iran's war machine. The country's military was left reeling, its ability to mount an organized defense severely compromised. The world watched as the full extent of the devastation became clear, with entire cityscapes transformed by the night's violence. On Iranian state television, anchors struggled to project calm and defiance, insisting that the nation would endure. But outside the studio, chaos and confusion reigned. In the streets of Tehran and other cities, people gathered around televisions and radios, desperate for news, while emergency sirens wailed and rumors spread like wildfire. The sense of uncertainty was palpable as citizens tried to make sense of the sudden onslaught. For the United States and Israel, the operation was a demonstration of both reach and resolve. Military officials monitored the unfolding events from high-tech command centers, while leaders addressed the world in urgent press conferences, emphasizing the necessity and precision of the strikes. Fighter jets returned to base, their missions accomplished, as the coalition signaled its willingness to act decisively in the face of perceived threats. As the first light of dawn crept over the Tehran skyline, a tense and anxious calm settled over the region. Streets that were bustling hours before now stood eerily empty, as people waited in uncertainty for what would come next. Journalists reported live from the Middle East, their voices echoing the world's collective anxiety as everyone braced for Iran's response. The opening strikes of Operation Epic Fury had shattered the night and changed the course of history. But, as military vehicles mobilized and crowds gathered in somber silence, one thing was clear: the conflict had only just begun. Iran, battered but unbroken, struck back within hours. Acting Security Chief Ali Larijani vowed revenge, and Iran launched ballistic missiles at U.S. bases in Iraq and the Gulf. Missile defense systems intercepted many, but some broke through, causing casualties and damage. Israel came under rocket fire from Hezbollah, while the Houthis targeted shipping and Gulf states with drones and missiles. Iranian-backed militias attacked U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria, turning the conflict into a sprawling regional war. Tehran's strategy: widen the battlefield, raise the cost for its enemies, and prove its reach. The Middle East was now engulfed in a multi-front conflict with no clear end in sight. The outbreak of war sent shockwaves through the global economy. Oil prices soared as the Strait of Hormuz became a war zone, threatening a worldwide energy crisis. Stock markets plunged, airlines canceled flights, and shipping companies rerouted vessels, disrupting global trade. Insurance premiums skyrocketed, and supply chains buckled under the strain. Defense and energy stocks surged, while travel and trade sectors suffered. Consumers faced higher fuel prices and travel chaos, proof that the conflict's impact was immediate and global. The world economy was now hostage to the war's unpredictable course. Operation Epic Fury split the world. Trump's supporters and U.S. allies like Israel and Gulf states hailed the strikes as overdue and necessary. Iranian Americans and some regional partners saw hope for liberation, but European leaders called for restraint, fearing a wider war and humanitarian disaster. Russia and China condemned the operation as illegal aggression, demanding UN intervention. The Middle East became a proxy battleground for global rivalries, exposing deep geopolitical fractures. The world order was being tested as never before. For ordinary Iranians, life became a nightmare of fear and deprivation. Air raid sirens, explosions, and internet blackouts shattered daily routines. Food, medicine, and fuel shortages deepened as the economy collapsed. Hopes for freedom were eclipsed by the immediate terror of war. Across the region, civilians in Iraq, Lebanon, and Israel faced displacement and violence as proxy wars escalated. The humanitarian crisis grew, with millions at risk of suffering and displacement. Iranian expatriates watched in anguish, torn between hope and dread. The true cost of war was measured in human suffering, not military gains. As of March 2, 2026, the Middle East stands at a crossroads. Operation Epic Fury has shattered Iran's infrastructure, but failed to topple the regime. The conflict has devolved into a grinding war, with Iran's leadership still defiant and its proxies active. Possible futures range from a hardline military regime, to civil war and state collapse, to, less likely, a popular uprising and new government. Each path carries immense risks: prolonged conflict, humanitarian disaster, or a fragile hope for change. The world can only watch as history is written in real time. One missile, one headline, one life at a time. The next chapter remains unwritten.